Hi everyone, this is Jay from ARNEC. We're just gonna give the webinar a couple more minutes for all of the attendees to join in before we start the webinar. Thank you. Hi everyone, we're gonna start in just 1 minute. In the meantime, if you would like to, you can feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, and we will talk to everyone soon. Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon and good day to all of you. My name is Jia Hao. You can also call me Jay. I'm a program coordinator from ARNEC. And today, before we begin, I would just like to let everyone know that this webinar is recorded for learning and sharing purposes. Okay, once again, big welcome to everyone. This webinar is organized by ARNEC and Save the Children with presented by Leah and Sam from the City School International School, ELC International Schools, Bangkok. In the webinar, they will share with us their stories and experiences on completing a rewilding project with a group of children. Now, we hope that through this sharing, you will be inspired, just as I have as a teacher, to co-construct a climate resilient future with young children. Throughout the entire session, if you have questions, you can feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A function. We will also save some time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, where I will activate the microphone for everyone. So if you prefer to talk to us, that's all good. Okay, now I would like to turn to your attention to Abhinesh from Save the Children. He will come on and share a few words about climate resilience to all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. And really glad to be here in this event. It's a learning experience, truly. And in Save the Children, we truly believe in the collaboration. And I think this effort itself is we're taking to learn and invite, and as well as across the different sectors that we do. We all know that climate crisis is everywhere and it affects everyone. But what we need to know, and we already know, is that children are at a greater risk, especially the infants and children of early age. And that's where is this high importance of this event, this kind of events, and this kind of demonstrated actions that we are going to talk about today and see in the presentations. Without getting into the technicalities of climate change is natural. What the epochs of what we know. And the climate crisis, however, is due largely to human actions. And that's where our role, our collective responsibility comes. And in last few centuries, whatever we have done now is the culmination of that. And we have seen the impact of that in the Asia region, especially, we can talk so many examples. One of the highest recorded heat waves, last year, I think all of you would remember, in many countries in this region, and change in the precipitation, which has increased the vector-borne diseases like dengue. Of course, we are trying to work around innovative ideas around that because, for example, dengue has a much different impact on children than an adult. So that's where I think we need to understand why it's so crucial, so important. And so for the sustainability of the planet and to safeguard children's rights, today and tomorrow, as duty bearers, this is our responsibility, state's responsibility to take the appropriate mitigating and adaptive actions. So some of the things that we're going to learn today are also mitigating and also adaptive. Adapt to the wave, the heat wave, for example, and how to do that in an institutional setting, and especially considering the early childhood development context. And in that direction, I think this collaboration with, led by ARNEC is really appropriate. Other crucial things that we would like to see more and would be hearing more is children's participation. And that's crucial. That's one of the things that Save the Children believes, that everything that we do that impacts children's lives, children should be informed, they should be part of that action, and we are going to see more of that. I'm not going to, the presentation, the speakers will be, talking about that quite a lot. And in terms of working with multi-stakeholder parties, that's where the crucial importance of working with the child and early childhood care institutions and school settings. And that's where, the whole philosophy, development ethos, as well as the practices, for a green future starts. So with that, I think I would like to stop here because I think today's main focus should be what we're really excited about the presentation. So I would hand over to Jay, you and Sam. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Mai, and I'm the head of school here at ELC International Schools in Bangkok. And I'm joined today by Sam Silby, who is our project coordinator for Year 1 and Year 2 classes. Project is our interdisciplinary approach to researching issues and phenomena of the world around us. It is a bespoke approach to learning with and by children. Each year we design each project afresh from scratch, and we co-construct it with the children in the class. It is a purposeful and authentic way of tailoring education to the present moment, the needs of our world, and the children who are with us. It honors their thinking, their ideas, and their agency, and it builds their 21st century skills of collaboration, compassion, creativity, communication, and critical thinking. Next slide, please, Jay. I'd like to briefly take you through our agenda for today. As you can see, we are very glad to spend this moment with you to investigate a concept that is at the heart of how we work with children, and that we hope you might find useful in the work that you do. While it may be hard for large webinars to be interactive, we do encourage you to unmute and share your ideas or write them in the chat at any stage. We would like this to be as interactive as you feel comfortable. There will also be some moments where we invite you to engage in thinking routines that will help see the concepts within your own understandings of childhood and within your own unique contexts. We will start with a theory that underpins why we do what we do, and then we will show you the practical application of these concepts within one of our projects so that you can see the theory in action in the remit of climate change and environmental studies. Next slide, please. So we're going to dive in and we are going to share some of your own ideas. Today we ask that you engage fully with your own beliefs, seen or unseen, about childhood. This is where we begin our journey. So to do so, we're going to use a thinking routine from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Project Zero. We use these routines a lot at school. They are easy to use and to apply, and yet elicit deep thinking and make that thinking visible. So today, try to dive deep, question why you think what you think, and use the routine to make visible your understandings of childhood. I've used these routines with all ages, from 5 years to 50 years, and they are freely available online if you would like to do this after the webinar. So we invite you to be brave, have a red hot go, as they say in Australia, and you can share your ideas with the group or you can keep them to yourself. This first routine is called headlines, like a newspaper headline. It asks us to write a headline for the topic, what is your image of the child? What is a child? It asks us to think deeply, summarize, and capture the most important aspect or point within 5 to 8 words. We'll give you some examples to get you started. It should be a statement, much like a headline is. It requires thinking and summarizing and prioritizing your views. It's great for English as an additional language users, as it doesn't require an extensive amount of writing or vocabulary. So for example, some great headlines that I've seen around the world from the field of nutrition: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I've yet to find a better summary of nutrition. Or as a colleague from Australia, Jenny Naylor, has said, the meddler in the middle, when she described what she believed a teacher should be. And from the early years learning framework from Australia, belonging, being, and becoming. So as you can see, these are short, sharp, 5 to 8 word headlines. We're going to take about 3 minutes now to give you an opportunity to write down some headlines in response to the provocation. What is your image of the child? Or what is childhood? And then Sam and I will share some of our own headlines. I can see the headlines are starting to come in. So be brave, share it if you will, give it a go, and don't be shy. Try and write down what comes to you, and maybe you have multiple versions. Some wonderful ideas emerging in the chat. Thank you for engaging so bravely. If you haven't had a chance to complete the routine, that's okay. You may choose to do this after the webinar. Right now, I'd like to show you some of our thinking routines around what is our image of the child here at the City School. Next slide, please, Jay. So it was important for me to show you some of my headlines, and also to show you that there were multiple headlines. When I was thinking about this webinar and I was thinking about sharing some of us with you, it really came to me that even though I've been working in this field for a while now, that my headlines of what is my image of the child change. They shift, they move, they refine, they prioritize differently. It's not a set and forget approach. It's not static. You don't write a headline and then that's in concrete. No one is chiseling this into marble. This process is a process that invites us to think, to rethink, and think again, and to challenge ourselves to think deeper and really own how we see children. And why is it so important to start this webinar by making you do the work? And that is because your image of the child lies at the very foundation of every action and every decision that you make in your work with children and with climate change and in every learning environment we encounter. It really underpins every decision that comes after. When I had to choose which headline of mine that I prefer at the moment, it was hope, just add agency. But again, it is a shifting landscape for me still. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to change pace a little bit and take you back into some of the history and the theory that informs our image of the child to affirm why this matters. Why did we start with the image of the child and not climate change today? And I'm going to take you right back to 1859. John Dewey, United States, a philosopher and educator, showed us that schools are how we reconstruct society for a more democratic future. He ties education and citizenship for the first time. Dewey argued that, quote, if social changes are to be brought about in a peaceful, intelligent way, people must be trained in the art of free and enlightened discussion as exemplified in schools where academic freedom prevails. Dewey outlined a range of ideas in relation to theory and practice: democratic education, cognitive growth and experience. He positioned the teacher as a researcher and co-constructor of learning in partnership with children, with social and community contexts. His value for children as active agents in their social construction of knowledge saw him advocate for curricula based on children's interests. So that is one of the foundations of education that we still use very actively today in our context. We also draw from another very important figure, born in 1896 in Russia, Lev Vygotsky. He was a psychologist who lived just a short life, but in his 36 years gave us insights into education that I still see happening in every classroom that I walk into in our schools today. He showed us that learning is socially constructed and that is what determines the potential of each learner. Lev Vygotsky believed that children learn about their world through the interaction with others, and that it is essentially the social process that is supported by parents, by caregivers, by peers, by policymakers, that plays a crucial role in the development of the higher psychological functions and allows children to fulfill their potential. Jumping forward a little bit to 1920 now, and Loris Malaguzzi is born in Italy, in fact, in Reggio Emilia. He's an educator and psychologist. He was recognized and is recognized as a visionary founding director and pedagogical leader who guided the transformation of the parent-run cooperative preschools in Reggio Emilia. And he turned them into an early educational system that is now recognized as an international leader in early childhood. His theoretical breakthrough was seeing children as capable, powerful citizens with 100 languages, 100 ways of expressing their theories, and actually 100 more, he says. And that the role of adults is to work alongside children to activate these languages by creating the right environments for them to enact their agency. By casting children as citizens from the very first moment of life, they are then imbued with human rights. They are seen as active members of society, and they ask the adults in their life to honor these human rights from the very first day. This work is more important than ever. UNICEF last year defined climate change as a children's rights crisis. We have to act now alongside children. Casting back to 1945 at the end of World War II, Reggio Emilia was a town in a post-war Italy that was decimated by the war. It had had the World War I previously, not so long before. And a grassroots movement emerged out of this devastation. And Italians in Reggio Emilia thought, how do we avoid world wars? How do we create a different kind of future? And they realized that if they wanted a different kind of future, they would have to educate the next generation differently. The sustaining force, which contributed to the ongoing project, was located not only in Malaguzzi's passion, but in the hearts, minds, and desires of the whole community of educators, parents, and citizens, Lindsay tells us. They built the school together with little to nothing, but a lot of hope. In fact, they say, we built the school, men and women, because we wanted it to be new and different for our children. They took what they could find, what was left over after the Americans moved up the boot of Italy and the Germans retreated. They found a tank, 6 horses and 3 trucks. And with that, they sold all these materials and founded a school, which is a very special event. From there, the Reggio Emilia approach to education grew, first and foremost within the municipality of Reggio Emilia. In 1960s, they opened their first preschool, the Robinson School, and that was closely followed by the Anna Frank preschool. From the start, Loris Malaguzzi was the educationalist, the pedagogista, as they call it, and he collaborated and contributed fundamentally to these emerging infant toddlers and preschools. By 1972, the Reggio Emilia Council had unanimously approved a rule book, a regolamento, which laid out the educational content and approach and organization of the Reggio Emilia municipal preschools. And at that stage, it was very much an approach that was embedded in Reggio Emilia, but also not known widely around the world. As a sidetrack for a moment, in 1978, Lev Vygotsky's book, Mind in Society, was published in English. In that book, which is a wonderful book and I highly recommend, he talks about the concept of capabilities and ties these to the interpersonal plane, We learn from each other in collaboration with more capable peers. In this way, Vygotsky moved away from strictly developmental approaches to learning and acquisition of knowledge, which see children framed in a very static and emerging way, into children as powerful citizens of their classrooms and their communities, learning with and together. In 1989, the United Nations launched its Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is a document that informs our practice every day here at the City School. Article 3, the best interests of the child shall be our primary consideration. Article 12, the right to express our views freely in all matters that affect the child. Article 13, the right to freedom of expression. But most importantly, this right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of the child's choice, which of course resonates so strongly with Malaguzzi's 100 languages. Articles 28 and 29 are the right to an education and the development of the child's personality, talents, and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential. And let's not forget Article 31, the right to play. If as teachers we are able to activate these rights with children in our daily practice, we know we are doing good work. So at this point in the late 80s, early 1990s, Newsweek magazine in the United States named the Diana Preschool in Reggio Emilia as the most avant-garde early childhood institution in the world, which led to huge interest from the United States and throughout the world as to what was happening in Reggio Emilia. And this is really when the Reggio Emilia approach broke onto the world stage and became famous. In 1998, the foundational book, The 100 Languages of Children by Edwards, Gandini and Foreman was published and gave a theoretical framework for the why of the Reggio Emilia approach. The image of the child is seen as capable and competent. It comes to life in the poem Malaguzzi wrote, "No way, the 100 is there." Next slide, please. And looking forward into the future a little bit now, into the contemporary times first. In 2001, Harvard University went to Reggio Emilia and they had a collaboration, which was a 2-year research project between teachers and pedagogues from Reggio Emilia and researchers from Project Zero. Out of that collaboration emerged a book, Making Learning Visible, Children as Individual and Group Learners. In this book, you can see all those threads from Dewey, from Vygotsky, from Loris Malaguzzi coming together, where we see these concepts of children's citizenship continue to evolve. Rinaldi, one of the great writers of Reggio Emilia, states, "The child is not a citizen of the future. The child is a citizen from the very first moment of life, and also the most important citizen, because they represent and bring the possible. A bearer here and now of rights, of values, of culture. It is our historical responsibility not only to affirm this, but to create cultural, social, political, and educational contexts which are able to receive children and dialogue with their potential for constructing human rights." This is a very big ask for education because we still have to learn how to read and write and do mathematics, but it's such important work, and it's a work that those children will carry with them into their present and their futures. In 2010, UNESCO joined the conversation with their policy brief on early childhood, and Peter Moss identified this image of the child. It is in a contrast to some other common images of children as lacking, as passive, as just developing, or following a predetermined path. The rich child, as Peter Moss says, is an active learner, seeking the meaning of the world from birth, a co-creator of knowledge, identity, culture, and values, a citizen, the subject of rights and not needs. OECD also participates in this conversation on childhood. They've defined their Compass 2030, which includes children's agency. Agency in education is situated within a broader ecosystem so that children's agency is activated by those around them, by the people around them, by the adults around them, by the environment around them. It's the relationships, feelings, the sense of connectedness and belonging that creates its ability to bring forth the child's agency. It is the ability of the significant adults of the child to cultivate the right milieu where agency can flourish. And it lies at the intersection between individuals and democratic practices. So just to conclude this timeline, I would like to restate, because it cannot be stated strongly enough, that the Reggio Emilia approach to education is a grassroots movement, as much a political movement as an educational one. It is built upon recognizing each child's potential to act in collaboration and employ multiple forms of expression. It wasn't ever a movement that was steeped in a lot of money. The very crux of the approach was built on a war-torn country that was scraping together what they had to develop a preschool. It is an approach that inspires many schools around the world today, including ours. And we are very proud of it. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand over to Sam, because I think what's equally as important is to see the theory in practice. I've given you the context of thinking about the image of childhood, and I've given you the theoretical and historical underpinnings. But what does this look like today in the work that we do with children? Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Leah. Like Leah said, my name is Sam Sylvie, and I am the project coordinator for Year 1 and 2 children and teachers here at the City School in Bangkok. I've been working here within this school and within this philosophy for 11 years now, first as a classroom teacher and then moving into this role here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the image of the child, which you've already done some thinking about with Leah, especially some thinking around a headline, and there were some beautiful ideas that were coming through. So thank you so much for sharing those. The approach that we use here at the City School emphasizes the image of the child as competent and curious, and it values strong collaborative relationships among the teachers, among the parents, and among the community. Learning is organized around emergent projects based on our children's interests, questions, and curiosities. It allows for them to have in-depth investigations and to express their thinking and their ideas through various media. Leah was just talking to you about the idea from Baker and Le Courtois around children's agency in education and how central that is to what we do here at our school. Children's agency refers to the ability of their significant adults to cultivate the ideal environments and settings where that agency can flourish. She also talked to you a little bit about Loris Malaguzzi, or a lot about Loris Malaguzzi and the poem that he wrote called The 100 Languages of Children. And I won't read the entire poem to you now, but I do encourage you to go off and read it because it's such a beautiful one. It's a poem that we entrench our teaching and our learning in here at the City School. It's this idea that there are infinite languages through which the children can view the world and access the world around them. It's called the 100 languages, but there is no list of 100 languages. It's just this kind of metaphor for there being so many different ways that children can explore the world and communicate their ideas. An excerpt from the poem says, "And thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, no way, the 100 is there." I think as adults, we're so often limited in our thinking that there's only a finite way to do things or a limited way to do things, and children will always tell you, absolutely not. There is infinite possibility here. Leah also already spoke to you about the importance of human rights in the Reggio Emilia approach, but I want to talk a little bit more about some rights that you may not typically consider. One of those is beauty. The environments, the conceptual ideas brought to us, the provocations of learning, all of these things are most meaningful, not just for children, but for everyone when they're steeped in beauty. We believe here at the City School that beauty is a right, and it's deeply connected to learning and a deep knowing. Linked also to this idea of human rights, we can also begin to consider the rights of other living beings too. We had a project here at our school many years ago where the children considered the rights of the trees. We believe that it's crucial for children to understand and appreciate the rights of the trees. Trees are not just a vital part of our environment. They are living organisms with intrinsic value and rights that deserve consideration and respect. By teaching our children to recognize and honor these rights, we're fostering a deeper connection to nature and cultivating a sense of responsibility towards the planet. By instilling an appreciation for trees and their rights from a very young age, we're empowering children to become stewards of the environment, global citizens who consider all living things, and therefore we're contributing to a more sustainable and harmonious world for future generations. We haven't just had projects around the rights of trees, we've had projects where children have considered the rights of the river that we have running through Bangkok here. They've considered the rights of the squirrels here at our school, the rights of our plants. So it's just this idea of having a deep consideration and honor for the living organisms that we have around us. Next slide, please, Jay. The environment in the Reggio Emilia approach to education is considered the third teacher. It's carefully designed to inspire exploration and creativity. This includes every part of our school, from our playgrounds to our hallways and common areas, to our classrooms, to our ateliers, and to specific learning provocations within each of these spaces. By creating an environment that is both beautiful and that inspires learning, we're doing something that will have the children take their learning to a different level. And it doesn't have to be difficult or expensive. We have included some photos here from some of our toddler centers in their environments that they have. And if you look at the mud kitchen in the bottom left corner there, that's actually made from upcycled wood and kitchen materials, people from the community bringing things from their kitchen that are no longer needed. We have recycled CDs and DVDs for the children to explore light. We have blocks laid out in the sun for the children to explore shadow. We have recycled egg cartons and food containers where the children were exploring mathematical concepts like shape and height, weight and balance. So you can use what you have around you and you can still create beautiful provocations, beautiful spaces for the children to be engaging in. It doesn't need to cost a lot of money. Next slide, please, Jane. Thank you. On the screen here, you can see something else that is really important to us here at ELC, at the City School, and that's making our learning visible. We make it visible to our entire community, including our parents and families. What you can see here are some examples of analyzed conversations. So when our children are speaking with their teachers, with their peers, we're actually scribing everything that they say, and then we make that visible to the families, and you can see Post-it notes and notes all over it. And that's where the teachers, the ateliers, the project coordinators have come together, and we have kind of analyzed everything that we see, that we're observing, and starting to think about the ways that we can take the learning even deeper. You can see some examples of formal panels, like the one in the bottom right corner, for example, and that's where we make visible the thought processes behind an experience or a concept. You can see things like expressive representations, for example, clay and wire, watercolor. And you can see as well some ongoing documentation that's added to daily, where teachers, ateliers, coordinators, we're adding things each day where we're thinking, whoa, this was a really interesting add-on from yesterday. Let me put it here so that our community can see that too. There really is no set way that learning should be made visible. It's such a fluid and flexible practice, and it really does look different in every setting. It's totally fine to have scrawled notes posted up for others to see. In fact, I think it's more than fine. I think it's beautiful because it's a true indication of our thinking and our processing, and it gives our community, especially our parents and families who aren't here for all of those experiences throughout the day, it gives them a real insight into what their children have been doing, but also what we've been doing with them as well.
Okay, so in a moment, we're going to dive deeper into one of our recent projects, a project on rewilding, where you will see all of these ideas and theories in action. I do want to make explicit that we are not a Reggio Emilia school. There is no such thing outside of Reggio Emilia. The infant toddler centers and preschools of Reggio Emilia are in sui generis. However, we have taken the inspiration from them. We have taken our own context into account. One of their original atelieriste who worked with Loris Malaguzzi, Giovanni Piazza, worked with us for many years. And now we still connect with different people in the Reggio network. And we are very proud of that. But this is to say that whatever you create in your own context will be unique to you. And that is as it should be. So we hope that today you don't take a rule book, but you take inspiration. So in order to do that, let's take a moment to stop and reflect using a different thinking routine called compass points, again from Harvard. So considering your own context and experience, whether you be a policymaker, an educator, a theorist or academic, or a government representative, ask yourself these 4 questions and jot down what comes to mind. There's no word limit this time, so just record some of your thoughts and you can go back to these after the webinar. And again, I will give people a couple of minutes to do so. As always, please feel free to ask any questions or make comments in the chat or to share your ideas. So, considering your own context and what you have heard so far, what else do you need to know? What excites you about these concepts? What is your current stance, or what suggestions do you have for your own context? And what do you find worrisome? Considering our time limitations, we can now move on. But if you haven't had a chance to complete all of the questions, please, I encourage you to do so afterwards. The thinking routines are available free online. So do enjoy those as well. Back to Sam.
Thanks, Leah. So like Leah said, we're going to do a deep dive into one project that has happened here in our setting quite recently. But like she said, what we're going to present to you today, we don't want you to take as a rule book and to kind of take it away and try to replicate that, because every setting is completely different and the needs of every setting is completely different. So I think it's important to note that I'm going to, in the interest of time, just show you a segment of a project that took place last year in year 2. So those are 6 and 7-year-old children here at the city school. I would need a lot longer than a 1-hour webinar to show you everything that was part of this project. So I am just showing you a segment here. And this segment that I'm going to show you will encompass everything that we've just been talking to you about. All of those, origins that we call upon to inspire us in our practice, but also things like the image of the child, utilizing the environment and making our learning visible. You will see that in our segment of our project here. The reason why we've chosen this particular project to share with you today is not so that you can each walk away inspired to do the same thing, but what we're hoping is that you'll walk away inspired to reconsider the way that you view children and their power and their capabilities. So to give you a quick context, leading up to this project, we had 3 classes of year 2 children who were interested in different elements of the natural world. We had one class who were interested in the journey from seed to plant, one class who were interested in the role of light and color in an ecosystem, and one class who were interested in the ways that they could inspire our community to take care of the environment. So the world of botany within itself offers a beautiful context for the children to become researchers. Children are so naturally attracted to wildlife, and the world of botany offers plenty of opportunities for hands-on discovery. The children had countless opportunities before this to develop a deeper understanding of the natural world and the interconnectedness of living things, as well as to develop important scientific skills like observation and experimentation and data collection. Perhaps most importantly, though, the world of botany offers the perspective of considering environmental responsibility and global citizenship. We're considering what we can do today to build a brighter tomorrow. This concept of rewilding, which is the concept of nature taking care of itself, is indeed an age-old concept, but in terms of conversations that happen in the world, it's actually quite a new and contemporary one. There isn't actually a lot of information out there on it yet, which some people may see as a limitation, but we actually saw this as an incredible opportunity for our children to become researchers themselves. There is someone who knows a lot about it and who talks a lot about it, and that is David Attenborough. And he reminds us that if we take care of nature, nature will take care of us. He says it's time to establish a life on our planet in balance with nature. And in order to do this, we need to rediscover how to be sustainable, how to move from being apart from nature to move to being a part of nature once again. So if we can change the way we live on Earth, then an alternative future comes into view. And that's a future that our children can create. So this concept of rewilding came from adult culture because as adults we're exposed to more things in the world. But that wasn't what determined that this was going to be a rewilding project here in our setting. That came from the conversations and the interests of the children. If us taking that concept of rewilding to them got absolutely no response, no enthusiasm, then we wouldn't have gone in this direction. Play-based experiences should be in response to the interest of the children and not based on a scope and sequence. We follow their interests and curiosities. We don't follow a book or a curriculum that tells us what children should learn and what they shouldn't learn and when they shouldn't and shouldn't be learning it. So as a team of educators, we discussed how we could bring this concept to the children, how we could further their thinking and engage them in a realm of rich learning here. Leia actually has a friend whose gardening team rewilded her farm, had also won the Chelsea Garden Show, which is kind of like the Olympics of gardening, and they had done that with their own rewilded garden space. So after seeing this, Leia saw it coming up on her friend's social media, she kind of looked more into it as a concept and thought, this is really cool. I'm going to take this to our team of coordinators. And we looked at this concept in real depth together, and we decided that it was a really interesting one to bring to the children and one that we believed could offer a beautiful scope of opportunity and development. So we pitched the idea to the children and they were beyond excited by this idea. Immediately, they knew exactly where they wanted to rewild a space in our school, and they knew that they wanted to set it up quite soon. So following all of these excited conversations, sessions in front of the window, looking at this space and thinking about what could be there, and further research into written and visual texts, they began dreaming about it. And very quickly, as often is the case with children, these conversations became quite fantastical and imaginative. They thought maybe we could have a TV and a resting space down there for us to sit and enjoy a movie, and maybe squirrels will join us. And then we'll have a vending machine for drinks for humans on a hot day, but also a vending machine for the squirrels. And it all got quite fantastical. But at this point, it wasn't even necessary for us as their teachers to step in, because there would always be one or two children in the group who would bring everyone back down to earth. And they were reminding them that this is a space for rewilding, for nature to do its own thing, not for us to enjoy. As we know, developing a plan does take time and many questions pop up along the way. So we had these kind of board meetings in the atelier where the children would meet together, and as their atelier, as their project coordinator, I kind of just sat back and I just let them have their conversations, and I documented them and made it all visible, of course. And here the children were drafting and editing and redrafting and drawing and rethinking and discussing how this space could survive with the knowledge that they had. So this is Tasha Finney, the friend that I just mentioned to you of Leia, who is an expert in rewilding. And she was really kind enough to engage with the children through video calls, and she shared her tips and tricks with us. Unfortunately for us, she is over in England, so there was time zones to kind of think about and all of that kind of thing, but she was very generous with her time. And leading up to these video calls with her, the children just had this one point of contention that kept coming up in conversations. And that was, how much intervention do we give to a rewilded space? Because some of us were on one end of the spectrum saying, absolutely nothing, don't even plant a seed, just let nature be. And then some of us were at the other end of the spectrum saying we should do absolutely everything every single day, plant new seeds, water, weed, curate the space. We need to be there for the space. And it was really great having this voice of an expert, because Tasha said, you know, in the beginning, you do actually need to give it a lot of effort and attention and care. But your goal here is to just pour so much love and attention into this space that it will actually learn to take care of itself the way that it wants to. It doesn't actually want you there forever. So that was a really helpful realization to come to. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the, as I said, with Tasha being in England, that was quite a limitation for us, because she did keep saying to us, these are the things that work for me in England, which is a very different climate for you in Bangkok. And so we had to try and take what she was saying, reframe, rethink how that might look in our climate. And thankfully, in our search, we found a rewilding expert a little closer to home. His name was Dan, and he also very generously offered his time, where he came to meet with a small group of children who interviewed him with questions that they had prepared themselves. And they then collated their new learning from these questions and shared that back with the full group to make it a common knowledge. The great thing about working with Dan is that he really does understand Thailand's climate and conditions very well. So while his advice was very similar to Tasha's, he was able to say, in Bangkok, this is how it needs to work. So our take on this contemporary concept of rewilding, of letting nature take care of itself, is perhaps an activist solution to rewilding, if you will, because we took this idea and we thought about how that could look in our urban school environment. We're not you know, out in the hills and the mountains and the forest. We are right in the middle of a city. So we had to think about how that could look for us. So Dan brought with him a collection of seeds from his home. He lives in the Green Lung, which is very much a very green space here in Bangkok. And he went and foraged a lot of the seeds that he could find on the ground. And he explained to the children that it was really important that we were scattering seeds that are relevant and local to Thailand, because anything we purchase commercially from a store, we don't know where they came from. We don't know how old they are. We don't know if they will actually grow here. So these two experts were happy to volunteer their time and their expertise, and the seeds that Dan brought with him were free offerings from nature. So again, to be able to work within this approach, you don't have to have a lot of money, a lot of resources. You can really get around this in ways that are very accessible to many different settings. So, of course, with Dan's offering of seeds, this turned into our whole community bringing back seeds that they were finding on their walks around the city. When I myself was walking my dog in the evenings, I was forever looking at the ground, foraging any seeds that I could find. And we found that teachers in other parts of our school and children in other parts of our school were coming with these beautiful gifts of seeds for us to scatter in our rewilding space. The space that we used is actually a space that we had available in our school, empty for the past almost 40 years since our school has been here. And it was kind of a forgotten corner. It was just there waiting for an opportunity, but no one had really seen that. No one had really noticed the potential. And, you know, we can always count on children to notice potential in space. You don't have to acquire land or have access to a really quite large space like the one that we had. You can rewild just one small part or one small segment of your property, or even your condo balcony. You could rewild an abandoned lot in your neighborhood. Or if you don't have access to any of those things, you could just share the ideas of rewilding with people that you know. So maybe they have a space that they could rewild. So, of course, this act of researching never ends. We are always looking, we're always learning, we're always developing. And through our continued research together, the children were gaining further knowledge to take with them that they were learning in these interviews, in these texts, and take it out into the rewilded space. Alongside the information that we had gained from Tasha and Dan and the texts that we were finding, there were still so many questions that the children had that were left unanswered. And I am not a rewilding expert in the slightest. And so I knew that we had to call upon others. We are lucky enough to have a community here filled with people who are experts in their field. For example, one of the children's fathers in one of the classes is someone who works in the field of carbon. So he came in to talk with the children, not as a rewilding expert, but as a carbon expert, to explain to the children that their rewilding is actually a really important part of taking care of our planet, and that there are a number of other things that we can be doing to take care of our home too, for example, considering our carbon footprint, the impact of our actions, using more public transport, using electric vehicles, all of those practical things that he could give us. But it also just gave the children a real sense of reassurance and pride to know that not only were they creating something beautiful for nature, but they were also helping to reduce our carbon footprint and to take care of our planet too. So, with all of this information that the children are collating, everything that they're learning, they were so ready to put it all into practice. And they worked collaboratively to develop an action plan because they decided that they needed something that would keep them on the straight and narrow, if you will, something that would keep them on task and get everything done that they wanted to get done. And of course, one of their favorite things is to be able to check off each part as they go along. You can also see beside the action plan there, Mai. She had taken some notes that she took during the interview with Dan. And the interesting thing about this is, you know, Mai had volunteered herself to take part of that interview in that way. And so she was taking notes and she realized that Dan's voice was a lot faster than her pen. So on the fly, she just developed her own symbol system to be able to take all the notes that she wanted to take, which was so invaluable when she went back to the group and she was able to share that and build a common knowledge. And so it began. We started by measuring the space and having various conversations around scale and size and the need for space to walk around the outside of the planter box and even through the center of it so that we could help the space to flourish in the very beginning. The children were already using different types of measurement tools in the classroom in their math unit. So they were able to build this very natural connection with their math unit, and they were experimenting and using these measurement tools that they knew of in the classroom to try and accurately find how much space they needed for the planter box so that they could pass that information on to people who could build it for us. They actually came to the conclusion that the best tool to use would be a meter stick to initially measure, and then a tape measure just to double check that the meter stick was accurate. As adults, we didn't actually agree with this strategy, but because the learning belongs to the children, we didn't tell them we didn't agree. We just gave them the space and the opportunity to test out their strategy. And of course, very quickly, they came to the conclusion that the meter stick actually wasn't very helpful to measure this space, and they were able to naturally find out on their own that a measuring tape was a lot more helpful. They worked together to graphically represent the space and to add the length and width in centimeters so that they could create very clear instructions for someone to build the box, knowing that their spoken language was different to the people building the box, but numbers are a universal language, so they were able to give them something that would accurately create the planter box that we were looking for. On another note, another concept that the children picked up on in their research into starting a new rewilded space is this idea of seed bombs. It's where you set seeds into clay so that they stay dormant, and then you throw them into wild spaces and you water them to allow nature to flourish there. The children saw this as a practical way of helping our planet, and they considered it something that should be shared with others. It's actually something that we got our entire community involved in. We invited in the parents, and the children taught them how to make the seed bombs, which they then took home to plant at home, and they asked us to have a good stock of them here at school, because what they wanted to do, and what we are doing, is every time a new family comes to visit our school to see if they would like to send their child here, we actually share the seed bombs that they've made with a little note, and on the back, you can see on the screen, it says, keep one seed, give one to a friend, throw the seed bombs into dirt that needs more plant life. But they also knew that to be able to teach their parents and to teach these people how to make seed bombs if they wanted to do it at home, that they would need to write some instructions. And so this was another natural link to our learning in the classroom around language arts, where they had to think about writing a recipe. And we will actually share a copy of this with you all digitally later as a gift at the end of the webinar today. So every day it was a hive of activity out there. All three classes would go out there throughout the course of the day to help with preparing the space, getting it ready to take care of itself, knowing that they needed to pour so much love and attention into the space only in the beginning to give it that chance to thrive later. Next slide, please, Jay. So we believe that children learn best through exploration, discovery, and collaboration, and that through encouraging them to lead their own learning process and to engage in thought-provoking discussions with their peers and their teachers, their opportunities to grow are rich and meaningful. You can see a video on the slide here, which may give you a little bit of motion sickness. I do apologize. This documentation was taken by children. They had a specific iPad, and every day they would go out and they would document some of the things that were happening out there. But as you can tell, the children were very excited, so the iPad is often jumping around, and hence the motion sickness. We did things like laying the soil and mixing the soil, where we needed to have a very specific mix of compost and river sand for best growing results. That was something that the children learned with Dan, and again, a very natural connection to their math unit, looking at ratios and percentages and how they could get that mix just right. We threw our seed bombs, we laid stepping stones, we hung plants and vines to attract insects. We had more sessions with Dan where we built a pond to attract frogs, you can see it there, and provide a space for the bees and the insects to come. The pond even has a wee little accessibility bridge for the frogs and a sand beach for the bees to land safely on and drink without drowning. Unfortunately, we did learn the very hard way what happens if there is not a safe landing space for bees to take a drink. We have a bamboo playground for the birds and squirrels on the wall. We have a bee cafe and a bee hotel that was actually developed by the children in a previous year, where they had built these in another part of our school to attract more bees to our school, and they thought what a perfect place to put them, so we actually shifted them to the rewilding space. We also have a bird bath, which we mosaic ourselves, and we have mirrors out there to attract more light to our planter box. That's actually based on some research that the children came across. This Norwegian town in winter doesn't get a lot of light, so they have these gigantic mirrors where they attract more light down into their city to bring happiness to the people and to the plants. And the children have a very not minimized, but a smaller scale strategy happening in our space here, where they thought maybe we could bring some more mirrors, some more light down to our plants. So this project was a labor of love, of research, of determination and collaboration. It was the perfect opportunity for the children to develop an understanding of who they are as learners, of how to contribute to a working group, how to take global action, how to inspire change in others. You can see listed on the screen here just some of the soft skills that these children were developing as a result of this project. Like I said, I don't have the time and space today to show you everything that happened, but you can see just some of them here on the screen. These are the types of skills that we hope for our children to develop. It's not just learning about the concept of rewilding that's important. What's important to us is the skills of becoming a researcher, an advocate, an agent for change, a communicator. These are the skills that will change the course of our future and that will develop a more sustainable future for everyone. In Luna's quote, you can see on the screen here, you can see that children didn't just develop skills and capabilities. They developed a sense of self-fulfillment, of self-worth, of knowing that they are not just children, they are scientists and rewilders and experts in nature, and most importantly, they are world changers. With children like these ones heading into our future, things are really looking up for our world. And here it is, the space that is forever evolving and adapting to the rhythms of nature. A space that completely flourished and took over during rainy season. I actually sadly don't have a photo of it during that time, but it became this absolute jungle where you could see nothing but greenery everywhere. You couldn't see the stepping stones, the bird bath, absolutely nothing, because that was what the rewilded space looked like in rainy season. It's kind of a lesson in the circle of life, the flow of rhythms, the ability to adapt and flourish in moments of adversity and challenges. It's a space where our children make hypotheses as to why and how and what the space will bring in the coming months. Well, this is how it worked for us in our space, but there are so many variables for how this could look in different spaces. Perhaps you would like to make use of recycling water and waste management initiatives. Perhaps you could recycle the water from your hand washing station, or you could consider different plants and species that work in your environment. Would bamboo work? It is very easy to grow and does grow incredibly quickly. Or could you rewild a wall? Maybe you could have creepers on a wall that would create a green space to help reduce heat consumption. There are so many variables for different spaces. So to wrap it all up, what you have seen here is just one example of a project in our school. I could have shown you any number of others. We think that rewilding is an incredibly innovative yet natural and relevant concept. But like both Leah and I mentioned earlier, we don't necessarily want you to walk away from this webinar and go and set up a project of rewilding in every corner of your community. We do think that would be pretty awesome, but we are hoping that this project was an example of the ways that a shift in your mindset can completely shift the education of our children. They are the greatest hope for our future, and therefore create a brighter, more resilient and sustainable future for us all. So the 4 things that you see listed on the screen here are the 4 things that we believe are the most actionable things that you can take away from today's webinar, alongside that deep set belief that our children, all children, regardless of their background, their status, their ability, that they are strong, they are powerful, and they are full of potential. That's it from me.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everybody for listening today. We'd just like to leave you with a reference. We're always trying to be research informed in our practices to make sure that we are very rigorous in the way we work with children. So I leave you with one resource, FutureWise by David Perkins, who defines a life-worthy and future-wise education as education that creates big understandings, big in insight, in action, in ethics, and in opportunity. And we hope you've seen this today with our rewilding project. We'd love to open up for questions if anyone has a little extra time to stay with us today. Thank you.
Hi, if anyone would like to say a couple of things, you could just either put it into the chat or you could raise a hand and I will activate your microphone for you. In the meantime, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining. I understand that we're running a little bit over time. But we appreciate all of you here today joining us for this very special climate resilience event on Earth Day. They're very appropriately to talk about a topic on working children and climate resilience. Since we're running a little bit over time, if there's nothing else from everyone, can I invite Abhinesh to say a few closing words?
Thanks, Jay. Again, really exciting. I'm really happy to see this presentation and all the children's, the way the whole thing. And I think I like the photographs because the visuals speak more than words many times. We don't have a lot of time, so I'd like to just highlight a couple of things which from an integrated perspective is very important and what we can take home from this presentation. One is definitely that climate crisis is a childless crisis, and this is a demonstration of the new General Comment 26 in action, actually, which the General Comment 26, whoever would be interested to know more, you can refer to it. There's a child-friendly version. So there was an allusion to UNCRC earlier. So it talks about the environmental and climate rights. So this particular presentation today is actually in action. And other thing is that the child participation is very important component and why early years is because when we handle the different material in our environment, like the soil, it activates the neurons in our brain in a different way. So that's very important part of it, actually. It's how it makes better sense to introduce early. And it's climate action in urban context. Urban context is very different. And you have heard from the presentation also, there are a lot of technical experts that collaborated. So collaboration is the way for the future, actually, for sustainability of any kind. Only a climate expert is not going to be able to do it, It's educationists, policymakers, the children, the communities, the caregivers, and the technical experts like the urban architect and landscape architects, for example. So And there's another challenge which is kind of juxtaposed with climate crisis quite a lot is pollution in the urban context. And that also can be considered when we are thinking of climate resilience. I could see some comments in the chat. People are asking about climate resilience. Climate resilience in action would look very different from one context to the other. However, the prototype of that might be similar in terms of the framework. For example, the species that we grow in Bangkok would be very different from another area in somewhere, in South Asia or and so on. So, and our role now looking ahead, what is a very humble reflection is that our role is to connect the dots, bring the thought leadership as experts in our own domains, and have practical demonstrated actions. And I think today's presentation was all about that. And it might be, there was a question of scale, and I think it's completely scalable. There are a lot of material available. And I think the team here from UNC and ARNEC will be able to share some of those perhaps with the participants. And I would like to end with a couple of keywords that I hear. The most frequently voiced one was curiosity. I think a lot of people, including the speakers, talked about curiosity. And I think that's the key. We need to have, as adults, we forget about curiosity. We are just, straitjacketed into thinking in our own silos. We need to just break that, be curious, and explore and find the solutions with children. Definitely, there are a lot of, there's a lot to do, but I think the start is always with the realization that it can happen here and now, and with even at a household level with children, as caregivers, at a school setting, at an ECD setting, and we have our own roles to play. And not just think of climate crisis as a scientist domain anymore, that's long gone. So with that, I'd like to, thank all of you and this amazing presentation from the speakers. So yeah, and over to you, Jay, now to conclude the whole event.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe Barav, sorry if I am pronouncing your name wrongly. If you want to say a few words before we close.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I was the one who asked about the scalability, especially in the context of informal setting, because I work with migrant communities, migration and climate change has a huge connection. So how do we take this kind of program with children settled in migrant context? So that is one thing, and how feasibility is to implement in terms of scale without government intervention. So that is my follow-up question was also there. So I just thought of but it's a great, we are doing research on how to take, Binash said, this has to start very early, and because the future is led by the early ones now. So we are trying to explore that way, and this conference or this conversation is very useful, and I look forward to seeing this record from the beginning, because I missed a bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to everyone, this recording will be uploaded online on our social media and our next social media pages, and we will also email them out as part of a newsletter. So do look forward to them. So although we have received a ton of questions in the chat. So sorry that we can't answer everything because we're already running over. But we will find a way to address all these questions. I've copied them down and disseminate it to all of you again. Just thank you so much. To Leah, Sam. Yep.
That if anyone wants to get in touch with us directly, either myself or Sam, or through you, Jay, we would be very happy to have offline conversations with anybody who was here today who we would love to continue this conversation with.
Thank you very much for joining. I'll talk to everyone again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.